this is something that I've had debates with people about for quite a while, is the actual definition of the word chode, because there's two different definitions for it that I've heard at least.
I've always understood. I think I know. Chode. People think it's the taint, and then some people think it's a shortened, wide cock.
Yeah,
or whale's penis.
Yeah,
I've never heard the whale's penis thing. What I've heard is that it's either the two definitions that I've heard is it's either synonym for taint or it's
gooch.
It's a penis that is as wide as it is long.
That's how I've always understood.
Iconoblast. We put the past on blast. Hit 'em with the truth, with things you never knew. Nobody is safe, no thing to place. Got Joel and Coop with history in your face. Iconoblast.
Welcome to the Iconoblast podcast. This is the show that takes a look behind the public facades of famous icons to show you why you can never take anything at face value. My name is Cooper, and sitting across from me, as always, is Joel R. Benner. But today, we are joined by a very, very special guest, Mr. Jack Mandaville.
Marhaba.
And Jack, thanks again for joining us on the show. I mean, I've seen your Instagram. It seems like you're never not doing something. Do you ever
you're a busy
have
man.
any time where you're not actually doing something?
Yeah, a lot of the time actually, it's just me and my dog. Then, yeah.
Oh, that sounds nice. How's Taco doing, by the way?
He's well. He's being watched. He's being taken care of right now. Yeah, I had to slip him some money because they watched him for a good 6 days now.
You had to slip Taco some money not to give him any shit, or you had to slip the babysitter some money?
Both, yeah. I bribe him any way I can. Yeah.
Taco seems like he could be a little bit of a troublemaker, but yeah, he definitely seems like a sweet dog.
He can, there's about an hour window in the day where he can do normal dog troublemaking things, and then the good news is he is a bulldog, so you have about 23 hours where he just lays around.
Yeah, I feel like I can really identify with a bulldog because that's all I want to do is I just want to sit around at my house for.
You don't have the
time,
body of
do
a
my own
bulldog,
thing.
but
No, I don't. Not yet. I
you can work on that.
I used to. I used to be.
You did used to be a big boy, yeah.
Yeah, just so
that?
you know, I used to weigh like I think at my biggest I was like 225 pounds or something like that. It was.
And now he's about 80 pounds.
The last time I checked, like 75, 80 pounds.
Yeah,
something. Yeah. As Dan said on. I think it was when we were doing a UFC live stream, like when we first got here to Austin. They called me over to sit on the couch and hang out with them during the stream. And one of the first things that Dan said is that I look like Matthew McConaughey from Dallas Buyers Club.
Yeah.
So it looks like you have just a touch of AIDS. But really, if you're going to have AIDS, just a touch is all you really want to have.
To look good.
Yeah, to look good. I think that's how a lot of the supermodels do it. The heroin chic. You get AIDS from sharing.
Good way to lose a couple pounds.
Yeah. I mean, a little unhealthy, but you're here for a good time.
Share
not a
some
long
needles
time.
on Skid Row for a night.
Live fast and leave a pretty corpse.
Yeah.
So is this normal for you to wear a shirt? I'm not used to you wearing a shirt. Normally.
It is, yeah. I'm usually only shirtless when I want to make people uncomfortable or when I'm performing.
Yeah. So how many episodes of the Jack Sesh has there been now?
We've done 11.
11 episodes so far?
Awesome.
Yeah, it's becoming a thing now.
That is probably my favorite show on the network now. And
that's because you've been on it so many times.
Yeah, it's also my favorite show to do guest appearances on. I feel the most comfortable being on the Jack Sesh. Anything else I get so nervous beforehand.
Yeah, oh, and the Jack Sesh is right there.
Yeah.
We've mentioned this before, but right there is the Jack Sesh set.
It's the bed.
Yeah, the ghost bed. Well,
You've been on there, Joel.
Yeah. I've laid in that bed. Yeah. It's great.
Yeah, we sort of crashed the Jack Sesh last Friday.
Yeah, you guys came in strong with the alcohol. You poured it right on air there. Yeah. While I was FaceTiming my girlfriend, and then I get home that night. You were drunk. No, I had a shot.
Oh, I hope we didn't get you in trouble. That wasn't.
It's okay. I'm in trouble a lot. That's okay. I get used to it.
Good. Yeah. I mean, she seems like she's a really nice lady. Your HSG.
My HSG, my housemate girlfriend. Yeah.
Yeah. So, are you taking a trip to Sweden anytime soon? I remember you talked about it once, but do you have like a date that you're going to be going over there?
As soon as things open up, I don't think Sweden really knows. I mean, she's got her passport. She can go there.
I don't think they let Americans there.
Yeah, I don't think they're letting Americans in right now. So
because we're naughty.
We'll wait it out. Yeah, we are a naughty bunch. I don't know what the closest country is in the Scandinavian area that even would allow Americans in. So we're gonna wait it out, and then it'll be perfect when we get there.
I think from Joel's experience, the closest that you can get to Scandinavia right now would be
Macedonia?
North Macedonia.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a haul.
That's a
kinda
long
far.
trip.
Yeah.
You'd have to fly in there.
It's a
and
2-day
then
trip to get
drive
there.
the rest of the way.
Yeah, no, I'm good with sticking it out here until they just open up completely. So
Yeah. Hopefully
got
that
a lot of
happens
museums
soon.
to see there in Stockholm.
Oh God, I would. That's something that I'm jealous of Europe about. Is the whole country has? I mean, not just Europe, but like Asia also. I mean, almost any country outside of the Americas. There's so much history and so many museums and so many ruins that
Castles.
you can go see. Castles all over the place.
She told me she grew up in a suburb north of Stockholm, working class family. She told me, and she showed me on Google Maps, there's a big, huge open field that behind where she grew up, behind her parents' house. And she just said it so nonchalantly. It's like, oh, yes, we used to go out there and we'd find the Viking ruins and whatnot. They would just find these.
What?
They would find these 900 to 1100-year-old Viking ruins.
Holy shit.
And basically in their
That's
backyard. And it
insane.
was like finding an arrowhead if you grew up in South Dakota or something like that.
That's what popped in my head. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, it's like when you find an arrowhead or something. Like,
Yeah, that's what happens, I guess, in those Scandinavian countries. It's pretty normal just to run into an old Viking artifact.
Are they under any obligation to turn that over to authorities if they find anything like that, or can they just take it home and stick it in a drawer?
I don't know. I'll actually have to ask her about that. I know that what I find interesting about those Scandinavian museums is they were never huge colonizers, the Scandinavians. The Norwegians kind of made their way around a bit. But it really, the only, before they were Scandinavians, they were Vikings. And yes, they were colonizers. They raped and pillaged half the world.
Vikings were very good at that.
Brutal, yeah. It's amazing. Christianity created like empires out of the French, the Spanish, and the English. Right? They used Christianity as a vessel to go explore and conquer, and where it had the complete opposite effect on the Scandinavians. When Christianity showed up to the Vikings, it completely pacified them.
Just kind of calmed them down a little.
Calmed
bit.
them down, right? They've never really got into the colonizing business. After when they went from Viking to Scandinavian, because of Christianity, they're just like, you know what? We're just gonna stick around here, make furniture, and
because before they were like, they were like slaughterers, right?
and
they were like
the
attacking
best
and
sailors of the world.
Yeah.
so it calmed them down because they were already crazy.
Yeah, but
Amazingly good navigators too, like
Yeah.
open ocean navigators.
and that's what I find interesting about the museum situation over there is, they don't, unlike, what you're going to see in a British or French museum where they have a lot of the world's, they stole a lot of the world's artifacts and have it in their countries. You're not really going to see that as much in Scandinavia, but you're going to see a lot of their own heritage in their museums. You don't see a lot of Viking stuff outside of Scandinavia. You're probably obviously going to see it in Great Britain because they were there forever. But really, the Scandinavian countries, when their history museums is really almost purely their history there. So it's I'm looking forward to going, seeing all of that.
I feel like that's fairly rare for a lot of Western museums, them being just primarily focused on their own history. Because
Right,
I mean,
'cause they stole
there was so much colonialism.
Yeah.
that they just kind of take a little bit of everything.
And if they didn't steal, they bought.
yeah,
Yeah, or they hid, and now it's theirs.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was in Colorado Springs, and it's in Colorado. You
heard
guys
of it.
you might have heard
I've
of
heard
it.
of it.
Yeah,
Is that
where
it's
it
kind of
is?
far.
I
But
did a show there once without my shirt on.
did you notice all the dinosaur stuff there? It's like a dinosaur town.
Oh, that
Like,
makes sense though.
if you
They're
look
right
at
in that area.
If you go to a gas station, there's usually a dinosaur sculpture or something, because apparently there's a ton of dinosaur bones found there.
and it's just
and-
normal for people to run into.
Yeah, and
them?
that's the same thing. Like kids will like find a dinosaur bone still to this day out there.
Oh, that's pretty rad.
Oh, I would be so stoked if I found one of those. I mean, it used to be. Originally I grew up in Southeast Oregon, pretty close to a Paiute Indian reservation, and it used to be really, really common for me and my sister when we grew up out on the edge of town. So we were on the edge of a very small town called Burns, Oregon, and our backyard was just the hills of the high desert. So when we would go play in the backyard, we'd be playing in acres and acres and acres of just hills. And it was pretty common for us to come across arrowheads while we were out there. We never found any other artifacts that,
No
at least
dinosaur
that,
bones?
that we could identify. But we used to find arrowheads, probably like maybe 1 to 2 arrowheads per summer, because the summer is
That's
when we
still
would
a
spend-
lot though, right? 'Cause
Yeah, I
they
never
were
found an
they were
arrowhead.
they were pretty pretty common around
And
there.
there's a story behind that, right? Everyone wants to think that it killed like a soldier or something like that, but really, but the animals, the families that it fed, that little arrowhead right there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That's something that we never even thought about when we were growing up. Like nowadays, I wish I still had some of the arrowheads that we found when I was growing up, because I have no idea what ended up happening to them. We'd, most likely we'd play with them outside, lose them. And,
Yeah, you just didn't appreciate it.
Yeah. But I wish that I still had some of those that we found, because now I would actually appreciate the history behind them.
It's like catching a home run ball at Yankee Stadium. It's a once in a lifetime thing.
You got to be old enough to appreciate it.
Yeah.
So you guys want to just
Probably,
jump
yeah.
into the main topic of the day? I think we've been going for a little while, so we got to get through a handful of information,
How many pages?
and it's just a few, but we can get through it.
Shit.
If we run a little over, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, we don't want to hold you back from getting to the Jack Sesh though, because
Yeah, that's why I have a drink here. I got to get in the mood for my next job. Yeah.
good. Hopefully this will be a nice little build up to get you in the mood for the Jack Sesh.
Well, this is the thing. This is why I actually worried about this going into it. I'm like, am I going to have such a good time getting deep about history and stuff like that? That's all I'm going to want to talk about in the Jack Sesh. Where I'm supposed to be a shittier version of myself on that show.
Oh yeah. You're a history major.
That's what I went to school for. Yeah, at the University of Texas. San
That's
Antonio.
fucking awesome.
Yeah, you honestly.
I don't want to do education stolen valor. I actually never finished my senior year. So
Oh, okay. I never finished my senior year of high school, so you're still
there you
ahead
go.
of me.
We're
there.
in good company. Yeah.
Okay, so I did test out of high school. I got my proficiency exam, so it was sort of a equivalency test that you would take to leave high school early. Because I was a bit of a bad boy, and I got.
But you were still a smarty pants.
Still, that might have been part of why I got so bored with school all the time. I got kicked out of school in my junior year, so I had the choice to
What'd you get kicked out for?
truancy. I technically didn't register for my junior year of high school, but I went to school every day for about 3 months and just hung out with my friends and didn't go to any classes. And then I ended up getting caught, and it caused a whole lot of drama. So I had to take the proficiency exam to get out of high school, and then I went into the military not long after that. And
There you go.
That was
And they make
fun.
you be there.
Yeah, you definitely can't skip a day in the military. That's for damn sure. So we talked last Friday just after the Jack Sesh, and we were discussing what the topic of the show. We asked you to be a guest on the show, and you agreed, and we were discussing what the topic should be.
Begged him to be on the show.
Yeah, actually, we just.
Well, I
begged and
agreed without
begged.
knowing the topic because I just wanted to hang out with you guys.
I really have been looking forward to this a lot, and we have some interesting topics today, but it's going to be a slightly different show than what we normally do, because we usually will focus on a deep dive on a particular topic for. I mean, we've been doing Julius Caesar for
8 parts.
Yeah, we're on part 8 right now, and we probably
Yeah.
have at least another 5 episodes to finish out the Caesar series.
Can I ask a question? I don't want
Absolutely.
to interrupt the flow of this, but
No, you're
how
here
much
to do as
time
much talking
have
as
you
possible.
guys spent on research going into it compared to just your knowledge you already had going into it?
This, for me, this was all. Joel has an encyclopedic knowledge of history. It's insane. He just never talks about it.
No.
So this is something that we talked about briefly on, I think it was the last episode or 2 episodes ago, something like that. What actually got me into ancient Roman history is I was playing a video game called Total War Rome 2.
Bruh.
They were
played it?
talking about that earlier today.
Oh yeah,
Dude,
that
it
was
is-
my my first year out of the Marine Corps had a little bit of a savings because of all the deployments. All I did my first year out of the Marine Corps, I didn't go to school, I didn't have a job. I got drunk and played Rome Total War for like a year straight.
Holy shit.
It's so good.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's the year it came out. I was just
That's awesome.
I'd never played any of the Total War series before, but I picked up Total War Rome 2, and the version that I purchased had all the expansions, and one of
that
the
came out in
expansions,
2005, right?
something like that. I didn't play it until about maybe 2018 or something like that.
Oh wow, okay.
So it was fairly recent, and one of the expansions that you could play through was called Caesar in Gaul, and I decided to play that one because the regular game starts off with
You got the whole map of Western Europe
yeah
and Arabia.
Yeah, does it?
And the Slav, actually basically all of Europe and Arabia.
Oh, for the full game, it
for the
covers
normal
everything.
game.
For the expansion, it was just specifically Gaul, and it was based around Caesar's campaign in Gaul after he had served his first term as consul in I think it was 59.
Yeah,
BC.
they zoom in the maps, and the maps are a lot more detailed.
Yeah, and they have all of the different areas that the different tribes lived in, the different nations. I mean, if you could really call them a nation.
After you did your research, did you find the game to be super accurate? Like even where like the tribes were and where it's all set up, is it accurate to the times?
The location,
until you start playing and making it your own.
The locations are very accurate. The tribe names are all accurate. When the campaign starts, the time period is accurate. There is a lot of extra information that they add in there to kind of give you an idea of what was going on in those periods, but as soon as you take control of the game, you have freedom to go in whatever direction you want. So you kind of rewrite history to a certain degree.
You kill Vercingetorix when he's a baby.
Yeah. And that's actually probably going to be the second to last episode of our series on Julius Caesar. His confrontation with Vercingetorix, and then going on to his triumphs. And
Who was the guy that got filled with gold?
That was Crassus.
Crassus.
Yeah, Marcus Crassus.
That was sweet.
Which reminds me, another one of the episodes that we're going to be doing, I'm not sure exactly when, but I definitely want to do an episode about it, is Mansa Musa, who was by far the richest person in history. He had so much money that when he took a trip, I don't remember the exact location that he was traveling through.
Was he a Celt?
No, he was...
I thought Crassus was the richest.
It was in Africa. Crassus was the richest person during his lifetime.
From Northern Africa, or like Carthaginian? Or?
I don't know if he was Carthaginian from Carthage, or if he was Numidian, or he might have possibly been Egyptian also. They had some wealth. Yeah, that's for sure. But he had so much money that as his congregation was making I think it was like a diplomatic trip that they were going on, they destabilized the economy in every area that they went through because he was just giving out gold like it was worth nothing.
So they didn't even need to send armies.
No, he didn't even, it's not like he was going through conquering anything. He was going through on like a diplomatic campaign just to like get to know people. And he gave out so much gold that he destabilized the economy of every single place that he traveled through.
Holy shit.
And then he was still rich by the end of it. He still had so much wealth by the end of it that it just didn't matter that he gave away that much. Just completely destroyed the economies of every place that he traveled through.
I'm looking forward to that episode because I've never heard of this guy.
Yeah, what's his name? Misi Musu or something?
Mansa Musa, I believe.
Mansa Musa.
And I mean, really, really fascinating historical figure, but definitely from everything that I can tell from my research, because I actually learned about him because I got fascinated with Marcus Crassus, and Marcus Crassus was the wealthiest person in Rome during his lifetime, and probably one of the wealthiest Romans ever. And I was wondering, so is this the richest guy in history? And once I started doing some research into it, this other name popped up, and Mansa Musa puts Marcus Crassus to shame. I'm pretty sure that's his name. I might be.
It's probably pronounced wrong. I'm
either pronouncing it wrong, or it's not exactly what his name was, or something like that. But luckily, we have some listeners of the show that are pretty good about correcting us on things like that, which we actually
like
really
Caesar's
appreciate.
Caesar.
Oh yeah.
And that's also why I pronounce Vercingetorix is the way that I've always heard the name pronounced.
That's how
But it is technically Vercingetorix.
Vercingetorix. Okay.
Which, by the way, this is a bit of a teaser for the episode that we'll be doing about him. That's not actually his real name. Nobody knows what his real name was because
it was the name the Romans gave him.
It was sort of the name that the Romans gave him. It pretty much translates to just King of the Gauls. Also, there's a theory that the rhyme Old King Cole was a merry old soul, and a merry old soul was he. That actually is about Vercingetorix, and it's a bastardization of the name because it was Old King Gaul.
Oh.
And then it got changed to Old King
I've been
Cole.
saying Nat King Cole all these years.
Another very famous king from history.
Yeah,
Another very wealthy king from history.
He had a wealthy voice.
That's for damn sure.
Yeah.
I remember the Nat King Cole.
Who is this?
He was an old singer.
Okay.
There would be advertisements on TV every year around Christmas, selling albums of his Christmas songs.
Yeah.
I always loved his voice so much. And so
You're being serious right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, anybody who actually knows what Nat King Cole looks like would know that I do not share the same skin tone as him.
But you guys have the same body type, kind of
And
tall and lanky.
He looked surprisingly like my dad.
Yeah?
I remember when I would see the old commercials and the pictures of him and things like that, I'd be like, he looks a lot like my dad.
Yeah.
Just, obviously.
His daughter was a great musician, too.
Yeah.
Natalie, she's still around. Oh,
Natalie
no,
Cole.
I think she passed away recently.
Did
actually.
she?
Yeah, she had cancer of some sort, but she had a great career herself.
That's sad.
Yeah.
Yeah, she had a really good voice, too. So you know what? I'll bring this back around and we'll get into the actual topics of the episode. Which, like I said, this isn't going to be a deep dive like we normally do. We're going to be going over today. We're going to be going over some Civil War figures, and we plan on doing more in-depth episodes about both of these figures in the future. But for today, we're just going to have a little fun and talk about some of the more notable quirks and coincidences about their lives. So the first one that we're going to be talking about today is Ulysses S. Grant.
Is that the guy from Jurassic Park?
Yeah, that's who he's based on, but it's a fictional representation of him. He wasn't actually an archaeologist. He was a general in the Civil War.
We could go down rabbit holes today, guys. Like, at the end of the show, we could just be talking about the original Ulysses. Like, it just is like...
Again, another topic that I would like to cover. And I want to talk about Odysseus. I want to talk about the Trojan War.
Odysseus.
I'm so fascinated by the history of like Greece and Rome and pretty much the entire Mediterranean during ancient, like the Mediterranean pre-zero, pre-Jesus. That whole era, Alexander the Great.
They had like 600-700 years of well-documented history there.
Yeah, and I want to cover all of that stuff, but I don't want people to think that all we do is history about, the Mediterranean, because we're going to cover a lot of different things. So I'm trying to stop myself from going straight from Julius Caesar into Alexander the Great.
We can always talk about the British slaughter in Zululand back in the 19th century.
Oh, yeah, the British...
Shaka Zulu just going in there and doing some damage to those boys.
Yeah, and it took a lot. So there's some, I think there's one particular fight from that time. I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it was like one small contingent of British soldiers against like 10,000 Zulus.
Yeah, it was their Alamo situation.
Yeah. And very, very brutal, at least from what I recall from watching the Shaka Zulu movie.
Yeah.
And they also made a standalone movie about that particular fight. Didn't they? It had like Michael Caine.
Yeah, that was done in the 60s.
Yeah, I remember watching that one, but I can't remember the title of it off the top of my head.
They did a movie called Shaka Zulu, and I think it was about that particular battle. If I'm not
I remember
mistaken.
watching that because I think it came out,
Or it might have been Zulu.
It was. There was a mini series on TV called Shaka Zulu that sort of covered all of Shaka Zulu's life, and I think that it included that battle, which those guys, they could fucking fight.
Oh yeah,
Shaka
They
Zulu's
could
a sweet
really
name.
fucking fight.
yeah. Shaka Zulu is a really
Yeah.
like that guy sounds like he stabs people.
Yeah, and they did with their spear sword combination. I can't
Zulu.
remember the name of the weapon off the top of my head, but they
Is
had
that like it's kind of like the Shocker? He stabbed people in the...
Yeah, they had this spear that looked like like you're sticking out your pointer finger and your middle finger and your pinky.
That's how the spear looked?
Yeah, the Shocker
And the
Zulu.
thing is,
Shaka
the Zulus
Zulu.
are still around too. They're still very much a dominant tribe in that region.
Are they still like?
Oh yeah, they're like it's an ethnicity out there.
sort of like hereditary power that's passed down over time.
Yeah, they don't kill British people as much as they used to, but
Not as much.
they still have. I think they still have tribal lords and everything out there. So it's a little more suit and tie than it used to be, but yeah.
Suit and tie more than shield and spear.
Right.
But I mean, you have to update with the times, or else you just end up getting wiped out.
Otherwise, the British will come around. Trust me, they will take advantage of you.
They're still looking out for places to go.
Yeah.
I mean, they've calmed down a lot, but don't let your guard down because they're fucking coming again.
They gotta keep the Queen's pockets.
Yeah.
Can we get a Shaka Zulu spear for the set?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
that'd be nice.
yeah, we should get one of those. I wish I could remember the name of the spear. There's a specific name for it, but it's a short-hafted spear that has a very, very long and kind of wide blade to it, and they would use it for slashing and stabbing. Somewhat, well...
Is it like a half sword, half spear?
Yeah, slightly.
Setup?
It's got a longer handle than a sword would have, so it is still classified as a spear, but the blade itself can be used for slashing and stabbing, and it's very, very long.
Sweet.
The blade's very long. The whole thing overall, I think, is only like 4 feet or something like that. But yeah, I can't remember the name. So back to our name, our topic, our first topic of the show, Hiram Ulysses Grant, or better known as Ulysses S. Grant. So does anybody know? Yeah, Hiram Ulysses Grant. Does anybody know what the S stands for?
Sam.
No.
No.
Grant didn't even know what the S stood for.
Like Homer J. Simpson.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it was actually the result of a typo. Grant was nominated to attend the West Point Military Academy in Ohio by Congressman Thomas Hamer. When Hamer submitted the nomination, he mistakenly wrote Grant's name as Ulysses S. Grant. Although he initially tried to correct the mistake, he was concerned it would affect his prospects of attending the academy, so he just rolled with it. In a letter written to his future wife, Julia Dent, Grant told her, quote, "You know I have an S in my name, and I don't know what it stands for. Find some name beginning with S for me." During my superficial research for this episode, I did find some people referring to him as Ulysses Simpson Grant, but I couldn't find any sources for that, whether that was a name that his wife Julia picked or if there is something to back that up. But yeah, originally his name was Hiram Ulysses Grant. Ulysses was his middle name, and the S was actually a typo.
What the?
After graduation from West Point, near the bottom of his class, by the way, Grant went on to serve with distinction in the Mexican-American War. Many other notable figures from the Civil War served during the Mexican-American War, but one of the most coincidental people Grant worked with was none other than Robert E. Lee.
They all knew each other.
That's something that's it's interesting, but it's frightening at the same time.
The American Officer Corps at that time was tiny compared to what it is now.
That makes sense.
It was tiny. I mean, the as far as West Point was one of the only ways to commission in the United States. I'm sure there was other ways to do it in times of emergency, like a civil war. But really, if you wanted to, the only realistic way into commission in the United States military was through West Point. So they all knew each other.
They all went there.
And those class sizes back then are nowhere near as big as they are now.
Oh, for sure. 'Cause, I mean, there just wasn't even that many people around back then.
Yeah.
And so I heard, but I wasn't able to confirm that Robert E. Lee and Ulysses S. Grant were actually both at West Point at the same time. But I mean, most likely,
They were bros?
Grant was already in his 60s, or I'm sorry, Lee, I think, was already in his late 50s by the time the Civil War ended. Grant was, I think.
But the Mexican-American War was before the Civil War, wasn't it?
yeah, Grant was around 60 years old when the Civil War ended.
Oh, well, then maybe
So
they are right.
They might have still been.
Wow, he looked a lot better than old Bobby Lee there, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
General Burnside was in that war, too, but he was a private at the time.
Yeah, was he?
Yeah.
I thought that he
And
had
led troops like a private. Yeah.
That was later. You know.
No, I thought that Burnside was like a lieutenant or something like that.
Maybe.
during
I
the
can't
Civil
remember
War.
now. It's been a while
They
since.
were all baby officers. All those big generals that we know their names from the Civil War, they were all little baby officers at that time.
Yeah.
That's
They all got their chops in that war, and then they went and had their own.
yeah. They all the Mexican-American War. It's like every single notable person from the Civil War.
They all did their time there.
Yeah, that's where they got their experience was from the Mexican-American War. Those familiar with the Civil War will be aware that Grant and Lee were somewhat at odds with one another during the war. Grant led the Union forces, and Lee was in charge of the Confederates. It was even Grant that accepted Lee's eventual surrender at the
Appomattox.
Appomattox. Okay, I've only read this stuff, so I
Appomattox.
didn't know how to pronounce it. Appomattox Courthouse, marking the end of the Civil War. Something that I learned a while ago that I always thought was really interesting is there was a guy named what's his name? Wilmer McLean, Wilmer something.
John McClane.
John McClane. No, his first name was Wilmer. Definitely, it wasn't Wilmer Valderrama either. But the Civil War, it started with the attack on Fort Sumter, but one of the first major battles was the first Battle of Bull Run, and the Battle of Bull Run occurred next to this guy named Wilmer's farmhouse. So he thought, hey, I need to get the fuck out of here because there's a war going on.
Moved down the road to Appomattox.
I'm going to move to Appomattox.
Yeah.
The Civil War ended in his parlor room in his house.
Yeah.
That's where Robert E. Lee surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant. So the war started on the property of the same man whose house the war ended in.
That's
which
crazy.
is just, a fucking insane coincidence.
So do you think in the first war, when they first met, that they had a drink together?
Robert E. Lee and Grant?
And Grant, yeah. Do you think that's possible? Before they became enemies?
Well, Lee wasn't a big drinker, and Grant was a very big drinker. But maybe it may be hearsay, but from I don't know if I read this or heard this, Grant was a known boozer when he was in the field, when he was at war, but he never drank when he was with his wife.
That's actually a perfect time to bring that up because during Grant's first term of service with the Army, he developed a drinking habit that he struggled with for the remainder of his life. It was his drinking that temporarily ended his military career when he was forced to resign after being caught drunk while on duty. Grant reportedly stopped drinking for nearly a decade before once again falling off the wagon after the outbreak of the Civil War.
Because he was with his wife.
Yeah, well, from what I was reading, it was the long-distance relationship between him and his wife during the Civil War that caused him to start drinking again, because there was actually two people that he would never drink around. Grant's drinking during the war was kept in check by two people, his adjutant, Colonel John Rawlins, and his wife, Julia Dent. Although he attempted to keep his drunkenness a secret, he was reportedly intoxicated during many of his most famous battles.
Yes.
Because, that's where you have the balls to tell your troops to just keep going in there, right?
Yeah,
You
for
gotta
sure.
loosen up.
So Joel and I have spent a lot of time talking about this over the years, and there was even a movie about it that I haven't seen. Joel's seen it. I can't remember the name
I
of it.
forget what it's called.
There's a specific level of drunkenness that you can get to where you're a little bit more effective than you are sober.
0.05.
Is it 0.05?
Yeah. Apparently, I don't know. The movie's all about it. It's got Mads Mikkelsen in it. It's a foreign film, but it's like four professors at a college, and they some famous person writes this book about it that's from the past. I can't remember this very well. It's hard to talk about. But anyway, these four professors decide to all stay at 0.05% always, and just to see how it affects you. And apparently, it was the greatest thing they ever did. Except one of them becomes an alcoholic and dies. But for the other three, it was great.
Yeah. They had a lot of work done.
Yeah, you got to.
They became better teachers. They were nicer to
balance
their
it a bit.
students. They were nicer to their wives. They were less stressed out.
Grant
knew what he was doing.
I've experienced that myself, where there's a specific point where you're just drunk enough to feel confident and relaxed, but you still have your mental faculties around you. If you go past that, then you start getting a little sloppy. But if you can just ride that line the whole time, at least for me, it makes me a little bit better at writing. Like I don't get drunk to write every time. I do most of my writing sober. But
yes, that's key.
it definitely helps with the research. Like being sober definitely helps with the research also, because I forget a lot of shit once I start drinking. That's why I have notes going, because I usually drink during the show. But also even like playing video games, playing guitar. When I was playing in the band, I would usually up until I got in trouble for it because I went a little too far. I would usually get a little buzz going before we played a show. I went past that line, and after about 2 or 3 shows that I fucked up really bad, there was a rule in our band that nobody could be drunk during shows anymore.
It is a work environment.
yeah, it was a work environment. I was doing really well up until I took it too far, and then
That's the hard part.
I
The hard part
embarrassed
is
everybody
staying at
during a couple
0.05.
shows. Yeah, that's really the hard part. One person who seemed to have no problem with Grant's drinking habits was none other than Abraham Lincoln. When a group of congressmen brought up Grant's alcoholism, Lincoln asked what type of whiskey Grant preferred, later saying, quote, "I urged them to ascertain and let me know, for if it made fighting generals like Grant, I should like to get some of it for distribution."
That poor bastard, too, had already gone through a few years of a lot of generals that he was just pleading with them to start something, and they were a little hesitant.
Yeah, Grant was, from what I can tell, I'm not very well versed in the Civil War, but from what I can tell, Grant was, the Confederates honestly had a handful of really good fucking generals.
Quality. And
then the Union side, they pretty much had Grant.
Had numbers in industry, and Grant was willing to fight.
Yeah.
After a couple shots.
Yeah, after a couple shots.
He probably stayed at a .08.
Yeah, he had to loosen up a little bit before he went in. Because Grant was actually, from what I can tell,
he had to be good at drinking, or else he would have, passed out during battles. So he knew where to stay at a right level.
There's no record of that I could find.
I'm sure there was. I would imagine there was a greater sense of urgency for Southern generals to go in and be offensive and make moves, because they knew that they had less resources, less men. They had to be more aggressive. Yeah.
Yeah. Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson were exceptionally good at that, especially during the Shenandoah Valley campaign. Through a lot of campaigns. It's actually kind of lucky that Stonewall Jackson's troops ended up killing him on accident.
The war might have lasted a little longer for sure.
Yeah, because Stonewall also was a very...
That's a badass name.
So, which, by the way, the way that he got that, I want to say it was during...
Bull Run.
Yeah, it was during the first Battle of Bull Run. One of the fellow generals saw Jackson come in with reinforcements from the Virginian Army, I believe it was.
Yeah, he was a Virginian.
And they all got up on the line and they started holding back a really fierce offensive from the Union soldiers. And the other general said, "Look at Jackson over there standing there like a stone wall, rally behind the Virginians." And they ended up winning the battle.
He was if I'm not mistaken, whoever the top general is of military, he was like the head of VMI or something like that.
I think he was, I'm not positive, and I don't think anybody should quote me on this, but I think that he was sort of second, like only to Robert E. Lee, because I think at that point,
in command of the actual, before the Civil War though, he was like the head officer at VMI, and then during the Civil War he was Lee's right hand man. Yeah,
definitely. I didn't know that he was
What's
actually
VMI? Is that a tech company or something?
It's a military college. It's like considered a prestige private military college now. I'm sure back then they were pumping out quite a few officers and all.
Okay.
But it's a private school.
Okay.
Or it's funded by the state of Virginia, not the federal government.
VMI.
Yeah, I never actually heard of it myself, actually.
Yeah, Virginia Military Institute.
Really? Yeah, I've never heard of that one. I've got one stepbrother that went to West Point, and I believe he's currently a captain in the Army, unless he's gotten another promotion that I'm not aware of. Then I had another stepbrother that went to the Annapolis Naval Academy.
Yeah, both schools that look good on a resume.
Definitely, and it makes family gatherings very uncomfortable for me.
I know, and then you're just sitting there like, I don't give a shit about your stupid school spirit confrontations here.
Oh yeah, and every year the Go Army beat Navy, that turns into a whole fucking debacle, and I'm not going to choose sides. I mean, between the two, which I mean, my family doesn't really listen to this, but I hope my stepbrothers aren't listening to this episode. I'd back up the Navy stepbrother before the Army stepbrother, even though I was in the Army myself.
But it's based on likability.
Yeah, based off of likability.
Yeah.
Because of Top Gun? Oh no, that's Air Force.
No, that's Navy.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah,
because you like Top Gun, that's why.
It's kind of weird that it seems like the Navy actually kind of has a more skilled Air Force than the Air Force does.
Well, they've been doing it
for
longer.
particular jobs. Yeah, that's true. But yeah, my stepbrother Preston is the one that went to Annapolis, and he's a F-18 pilot now. So goddamn proud of that guy. He's so fucking awesome.
I think the Navy puts, not that the Air Force doesn't, the Navy puts a lot of their focus into their more aggressive aircraft types and fighter pilots and everything. Where the Air Force it's more of a technologically driven branch of service. Not that they don't have great fighter pilots and they're not on the not out there doing crazy aggressive stuff, but they put a lot of their funding and effort into the sciences and engineering and all sorts of other
Yeah,
aspects
very
of
much
military.
so. The Air Force has very, very skilled golf players. I'll say that
Sure,
much.
yeah.
A unique quirk of the legendary general. We're talking about Grant again here.
Is there any evidence of him falling asleep during a battle because he was too hammered?
No, nothing that was ever
Yeah, so he had his
recorded that
shit
I know
handled.
of.
Yeah.
He had his shit handled.
Yeah, he definitely.
He wasn't getting kicked out of the band.
Yeah. I didn't get kicked out. I just had a rule made that nobody could be drunk, but they also didn't single me out, which was fair.
Nice
of
of
them.
Very professional.
Yeah.
But you were the only one
very
that drank in
professional
that
of them.
group. Zero Christians.
The only one that got drunk enough. I'm not sure. I think I might have mentioned this story on the show before, but what ended up
Probably.
happening is we had a specific
Coop
song.
loves talking about himself in the band.
Hey, we have had listeners ask us to talk more about our past, so I'm just doing a little fan service right now. What happened was we had a specific song that we would open up all of our sets with, and I was the one that would start the song, and it had a somewhat complicated lead part. We actually played it on one of our earlier episodes. We opened up the show with the
Well, you
with the
couldn't
song.
play it. We had to get the song and play the song.
Well, yeah, we had to play. I've got the CD sitting right behind me here on the set. So it was a complicated song to play, and even when I was sober, I had a little bit of a hard time playing it. Once I got drunk, it just turned into a fucking mess. So we had, I think it was about 2 shows in a row where I got drunk enough that I couldn't play the intro song. It was just an instrumental that we would play, and then once the song was over, the lead singer would come out on stage and we go right into the next song. And if the song starts off with primarily just me not playing by myself, but everybody else is just holding a single note, and then I'm playing the lead over the top of it. And if the person playing the lead over the top of the rest of the music is fucking it up, it's really, really, really noticeable, and it throws everybody else off. So that happened at like 2 shows in a row, and then after the second show that it happened at, they created a rule that everybody had to be sober, even though it was just me that fucked up the
Yeah.
shows. But thank God that they didn't single me out, because that would have made me feel really self-conscious. So a unique quirk of the legendary general was his dressing habits. During his time at West Point, Grant received multiple demerits for having an unkempt uniform. This preference for dressing like a homeless person apparently followed him into the Civil War, as unlike his peers, Grant rarely carried a sword, wore an ordinary private's coat with his rank sewn onto it, and preferred a civilian-style hat. And witnesses at the time described him as just looking like another member of the rank and file. He would have mud all over his boots. He's wearing a simple uniform. He's not dressed up real nice like the rest of the officers at the time.
He was worried about
would have
snipers.
been.
That's what it was.
Maybe, or he was just too drunk to.
That was
put
the
his
thing at
uniform together.
Appomattox, as Lee, who was going to surrender, came in polished, wearing his nicest dress uniform, silver sword, shiny black boots, looking the sharpest you could for a guy that is giving up his army after 4 years of fighting. And Grant showed up looking exactly how you just described
Grant just showed
him.
up looking like a
Just
hobo.
Okay, I accept your surrender, General.
Yeah, can we get this over with? Happy hour's about over.
I need to go back. I miss my wife.
I don't know. I think it's really interesting that somebody with so much skill and so much talent at leading these armies had no care for, because usually you picture a high-ranking officer as being like one of the most squared-away people in the whole company or the whole.
That's how we
brigade,
see it.
battalion.
That's how we see it nowadays too, right?
Yeah.
You can't get to that level. Even you can't get to really any level in the officer corps past captain without being prim, proper, and shiny and good looking. They don't hire you for just being a tough guy in the field anymore. You got to be the whole package.
You got to set an example for everybody
Yeah.
else. So yeah, he just apparently didn't give a fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of apathy, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but that seems like the kind of apathy that carried into his presidency. Grant himself probably wasn't one of the worst Americans in president history, but he just let his cabinet do whatever the fuck they wanted. And some of those guys were not good guys.
Yeah, that's true. And also, besides Grant's biggest success really was during his time in the military, because a lot of the things that he did outside of the military, he in between. So before he went into, or not before he went into the military, when he had that.
He was a shopkeeper, right?
Yeah, he was an entrepreneur or businessman, failed at everything
Yeah.
that he did. outside of the military. He was also never a politician up until he became a president,
Right.
which is kind of
Like
interesting.
Ike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just went
He'd spent
straight from being a military leader into
There are transferable skills there, right?
Oh.
Like administering over people, like there is a tie there, but being a general your entire life and then being the guy that can be
Big difference.
yeah.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a leap there, especially not knowing how to navigate the political battlefield.
Right. Slimy motherfuckers that are going to attach themselves to you.
Definitely different tactics
Yeah.
that are needed there. But yeah, he wasn't a horrible I mean, at the very least, he got rid of the KKK, which was, good on him. He ran the KKK out of...
Granted?
Yeah.
Well, they didn't go away for long.
Not for very long, but he did run them out of, I believe it was, I'm probably wrong, but I believe it was Georgia or something like that.
Oh, wow. And we were still in our Reconstruction period at that point.
Yeah.
They had a little more, they had federal troops to do that.
Yeah.
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 Once those federal troops left, the KKK was like, I think we're good now, boys. We're going to stick around.
Come on back.
Yeah.
Which I don't think, who was it that, I think it was actually, who came after Grant? I believe that he was elected through a bunch of really shady help from the Associated Press. They were running pretty much the Associated Press, which I didn't even know that they had been around for that long.
Was it Garfield?
I want to say, was it Buchanan or Hayes?
No, Buchanan was before Lincoln.
Okay, so maybe it was Hayes. I don't remember exactly, but I know that. So Grant was doing a good job of running Reconstruction and trying to reunite the country,
right,
and give freedom to all the former slaves,
right, and that's why those federal troops had to be down there, was to protect them, because again, if you left white Southerners to themselves at that time, they were going to do KKK types of things.
Yeah, pretty much the entire South was a sundowner town back
Yeah.
then. You do not want to be a different color than white during that era. But from what I can tell, Grant was doing a pretty good job at running the Reconstruction. And then it was, I believe, the follow-up president who was helped through a bunch of propaganda from the Associated Press to gain his presidency. And then he just squashed all that shit.
Right. It's almost like the equivalent of like when you look at the history of colonialism. It's actually, this is not a great comparison. I should shut up now. But when you look at the history of colonialism, how these European countries who basically fucked Africa up, but they at least were holding some sort of infrastructure there. Well, then they just left overnight, and they didn't teach anybody there how to deal with it on their own. So this is a terrible comparison, but transitively, that's what happened there. Is there was a system in place to reunite the country and get things back together and provide infrastructure to the South and help rebuild the South, give jobs to the white and black Southerners there. Well, then all those federal resources and protection just up and leaves, and then you're just kind of left to the devices of warlords and
Yeah, I mean,
shady characters.
Liberia worked out a little bit worse, but yeah, that's similar to what happened in Liberia. You send a bunch of freed slaves off to start their own country, but without the support and the information to run said country.
Right.
It's still I think even to today, it's still a very violent and unstable place.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, that shit that people are going to be dealing with for God knows how much longer, because I don't see any of that changing anytime soon.
No, you can't just fuck up someone's system and be like, okay, guys, on your own.
All right, good luck.
Yeah.
Have fun.
Like we did with
You'll
Iraq.
be fine.
Yeah.
And starting in September of this year, Afghanistan, we're pulling out of Afghanistan.
The Afghanis will just go back to the way things were.
They'll
be fine. They've always just been like, oh, we waited them out. Let's go back to the old ways.
From my knowledge, the Sykes-Picot agreement that happened after, was it World War One or World War One is when they had the Sykes-Picot agreement, right? Where
I'm not familiar.
They redrew. They had a bunch of like British officials just arbitrarily redraw.
That was
all
World
of
War
the
One.
borders.
Yeah.
But
it continued into World War II. Yeah.
Yeah, and that ultimately led to what was originally it was a turbulent area, but they had their tribal lines, and there would still be.
And they're familiar with
infighting.
those lines. The British weren't when they drew these maps out.
Yeah, just completely arbitrarily drawing all of these new borders, and all of a sudden you have two opposing tribes trying to exist.
That's how you get countries like Iraq, where you had like a Sunni minority ruling the Shiite majority. Like, well, at least with Saddam, he knew how to kept things peaceful there, relatively. Yeah.
Nerve gas. Yeah,
right.
I mean, that's.
But the thing is, no Westerner was going to be able to contain that situation from the lines that they drew.
No, not at all, because we don't understand the culture enough to be able to create those bonds between different tribes.
King Abdullah II of Jordan, who's always been a great friend of the United States, was begging George Bush not to invade Iraq. It wasn't because he was trying to protect Saddam Hussein. He was trying to protect the United States of America. He knew this is doomed from the start if you try to mess with Iraq. And it's yes, of course, we went in there in 3 weeks and invaded the country and we won in this offensive blitzkrieg. But what happened after that? Like, this is what Americans don't understand Arab culture, and like Arabs do understand Arab culture. Guys like Abdullah warned us, don't do this. Don't do this. You're not going to win, buddy.
It was obviously a bad idea.
Yeah.
And yeah, it looks like, I mean, I don't know enough about the whole situation to really be able to say exactly how it's going to play out. But I mean, once we pull out in September of this year, it's going to go back to the norm.
Afghanistan's going to be Afghanistan.
Yeah.
These are people that have beat off. Oh, that's again terrible phrasing. But they have beat off the Greeks under Alexander, one of the greatest military organizations ever. They've beat off the Indians. They've beat off the Persians, the Ottomans, the British, the Russians, now the Americans, and so many other surrounding areas. The United States, we thought we were going to be different this time.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's sort of falling into the old trap of starting a land war in Asia during the winter. So you might think that you're going to
that's what we
a
did.
little bit better, but no, it's going to end up the same way.
Yeah.
So I'll bring this back around. I'm really not good at segues. We've talked about it on the show before.
May I do the segue?
Yes.
I'll tell you one thing. Grant would have never invaded Afghanistan.
You know what? Speaking of Grant, let me just say that besides,
you had it. You had it.
It's okay.
Almost.
Joel edits these episodes and makes me look good, so it's okay. Besides dressing like a crust punk, Grant was also astoundingly bashful. Unlike many of his contemporaries, the future president refused to bathe or undress in front of his men. This wasn't just during the war either. Later in his life, Grant boasted that nobody had seen him fully nude since he was a child, and this has some strange implications considering he was married twice and had 4 children.
Holy shit.
So it was like when he was around his 60s or something like that, he was telling somebody that nobody's ever seen me naked since I was a young boy.
Yeah.
Even his wife?
I don't know.
I'm getting
like,
some
that's
Michael Jackson vibes to that. Yeah.
Ooh, yeah. That, I mean, it seems like that's the
Are those
implication.
kids really yours?
Well, I mean, he could just, let it
Pulled it out through the
peek out from the
sleeve.
zipper.
Yeah.
I don't think they had zippers back then.
Do it old Hasidic style, yeah.
Yeah. Or I think it's Mormons also. They've got the magic underwear.
They got the underwear, but I think
he kept his socks on.
I think during intercourse, Mormons go full naked, if I'm not mistaken.
I would assume so. From the Mormon porn that I've seen, they're just as crazy as everybody else. But those might be ex-Mormons that I've seen in pornography. I don't know. I've never checked their credentials personally. But Joel, you have a very good point.
He kept his socks on. When
He
he
might
was
have
with
just
his
kept
wife.
his socks on. That's not fully nude.
Yeah.
So he could say that. Technically, he wasn't.
It helps with climax too. Yeah.
To keep the feet warm?
Yeah.
That's
It's something with the circulation and pushes more blood up to your
Genitalia.
I'm gonna have to try that. Maybe that's been my problem this whole time. Is I just got to keep my socks on.
Wear tube socks.
Or the kind of socks that have the sleeves for each toe.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because I do.
I've never worn those. Have you?
No, I
probably
wear,
only have those.
I wear them up until the point of copulation, and then I take them off. So I'm just gonna have to leave them on next time. For a man who made himself a legend in numerous battles, Grant was extremely squeamish. The general hated the sight of blood, and not just on the battlefield. When he would order steaks, he requested them to be cooked until they resembled charcoal.
That's some Donald Trump vibes right there.
That was the first thing that I thought of when I read that. Is like, oh man, that's something that
Donald Trump.
Like, you order a well done steak and then put
Dirty,
fucking
never
ketchup
naked,
on it,
shy, and cooked his meat till it was burnt.
and he had horrible taste in steaks.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, I think that's probably the biggest problem that I have with him is I can understand being squeamish around blood because I'm not a fan of blood either. Yeah. It's actually, it's weird. If it's somebody that I know or myself, if I see the blood, it'll make me lightheaded, depending on how bad it is. If it's just a little bit, then it's no big deal. But like a friend of mine, when I was one of the guys that I was in the band with,
here we go.
ended up. Joel, you're
talk about the band
you're
again.
you're just jealous because you were never part of the band. I tried to make you part of the band at one point, but everybody else didn't go with it.
Yeah.
So the bass player in my band at one point was making a grilled cheese sandwich, and he was using a serrated knife. He was holding the block of cheese and cutting towards his fingers. He ended up cutting like all the way down to the bone on one of his fingers. I was standing right next to him when it happened.
He had a Ginsu, I get it.
And it was so fucked because when he cut himself, he, like said, ow, and shook his hand, and it sprayed blood all over the ceiling.
Oh.
So he was sitting there next to the sink, letting it bleed into the sink, and he was holding his hand. And I walked over to him and asked him how bad it was. And he was like, oh, shit, look. And he moves his hand and then spreads the skin apart. And I saw the bone because he had actually, he'd grated all the way down to the bone. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, okay, we're going to have to get you to the hospital. Then I started, getting tunnel vision, and I started sweating. I was like, somebody else is going to have to drive you. And I had to go lay down on the couch.
Well, speaking of bloody messes, wasn't Grant's nickname Grant the Butcher?
Was it
I believe so.
I heard the nickname Unconditional Surrender Grant from his first victory, or I think it was from his first two victories.
Vicksburg.
Yeah. And he demanded unconditional surrender and got it. I think the first two battles that he fought,
What's the difference between surrender and unconditional surrender?
That means that they don't get any say in it. They just need to put down their arms and
Oh, they don't get to
give up,
debate what they get out of it or something.
Yeah, you just have to flat out
drop your weapons,
give up everything. Yeah. You're prisoners of war now.
Unconditional.
But yeah, I never heard the Bloody Grant nickname before.
I thought one of his nicknames was like Grant the Butcher or something like that.
It very well might be. Like
because
I said,
because he unlike his predecessors in the Army of the Potomac, there wasn't afraid to just send his boys in there to get slaughtered. Yeah, but it ended the war.
Yeah, he definitely did his fair share to end the war, because I think, like we were talking about earlier in the episode, he was definitely one of the most effective, if not the most effective,
simply just by showing up and fighting. Yeah,
being able to get shit done. Yeah. And I think that you're right that the South definitely had a lot more to. They had less resources and they had a lot more to lose at the time. Yeah. So the Southern generals, they knew that if they lost, they're going to be fucked.
Yeah.
They committed if the North wins, they committed treason.
Yeah, they always had to be. It was obviously Gettysburg was the turning point in the war, and it was at that point that they started marching them back into Virginia, and then it got deeper. By the time they by 1865 they had cornered them down there in Petersburg in southern Virginia. Like, they took them deep into the southern part of Virginia, and they'd pretty much all they could do was build some fortress around themselves and just try to hold out as long as they could, but it was kind of lost at that point.
Yeah, they got very they were pretty much fighting an entirely defensive war towards the end.
Yeah, they had no choice. There was not going to be any breakout, and also Sherman was just storming through the South, not only just destroying other Southern armies, but he was obviously just putting major damage to their supply lines and everything like that.
Yeah, and also at one point, I'm actually not sure how much of an effect this had on the war overall. I would assume that it had a decent sized effect, was when Abraham Lincoln gave freedom to any slave that came from the South up to the North. So the slaves
was that
would
part of the Emancipation Proclamation?
I believe it was, but So we did an episode years and years ago. We don't have any of our original episodes online anymore. We might end up re-uploading them at some point. But one of our original episodes was about Confederate iconography and the history of the Confederacy.
You mean that lost cause bullshit?
Yeah, the lost cause bullshit, which, I mean, it's just retconning history. So, which for an understandable reason, but still a shitty reason, which was like, okay, we lost the war. We need to make sure that our future generations don't get lumped in with the bullshit that we did. So let's just say, you know,
I can
it wasn't
understand
about
if you're
slavery.
a veteran of that war. But the direction the way that narrative took on a life of its own with their after these guys were long dead, the way that it still permeates in way too many people in modern American culture. That's the problem right there.
I mean, I think that's from my limited understanding of it, I would say that that's the sole reason that anybody is still flying the Confederate flag anywhere is because of the what was it, the Sons of the Confederacy and the lost cause.
The thing is, like, the average Southerner I've met, the average Southerner that I've lived all over the country. I've lived in the South. I've lived all over the country. I know people from the military and all sorts of walks of life who are from the South. The average Southerner I've never met, the average white Southerner that I've known in my life, A, isn't flying that flag. B, is a great representation of the South, because the American South has so much to be proud of, right? The cuisine, the music that's come out of that place, the literature that's come out of that place, the architecture, all sorts of great non-racist parts of the antebellum era and everything like that.
I mean, Mark Twain was a Southerner, wasn't he?
He was Missouri, right? One of those,
in-betweener.
Well, yeah, he was an in-betweener. But like the Southern Southern culture and white and black Southern culture go hand in hand as far as advancing like Southern culture.
Yeah.
The majority of people I know from the South aren't fucking waving that flag. It's always like the shit. It's just like the shittiest. Like, what? Why are you holding on to this 4-year period? Most of the people in the South are over it.
Which, that's something that I've had a hard time understanding, because I'm not originally from the South.
Neither am I.
Like I've said
right?
before,
And I'm talking from a northerner's perspective.
Yeah, I'm from Southeast Oregon, which, I mean, that Oregon wasn't even a fucking state during the Civil War.
Just weird panhandlers.
Yeah, just a bunch of weird. I mean, it's still a lot of weird panhandlers.
Yeah, right.
I've described Oregon before as being a bunch of redneck hippies. It's a bunch of people that like to smoke pot and shoot guns.
Yeah.
But that's something that I've had a hard time understanding is, to me, and this is me speaking as somebody who doesn't have strong Southern heritage. I mean, my dad was originally from Missouri. Missouri wasn't even really part of the South.
Yeah, it was a border state. There was actually a lot of conflict in the Civil War in Missouri because it was a very conflicted border state.
Okay.
There were Confederate guerrilla forces roaming the area. Actually, the Missouri history in the Civil War alone is fascinating. It was an extremely contentious area.
I'm going to have to look into that just so I understand, I mean, at least the heritage from my father's side of the family a little bit more, because my dad's whole side of the family started off in Missouri before moving to Oregon originally. But what confuses me is how, and if anybody listening to this can actually give me some insight on this, I'm definitely open to learning more about this, is by flying a Confederate flag, I feel like that's anti-patriotic, because that's a group that was trying to divide the Union and were ultimately determined to be treasonous.
And they lost.
Yeah. I don't personally understand the pride taken in having a Confederate history. You can be proud of your family.
A lot of it's from propaganda.
That's from, so when we were doing...
And you can sit there and say logically, Robert E. Lee was a very highly intelligent, one of the smartest officers in American military history.
Definitely.
You can say that without being treasonous, but to say that he was right to take up arms against the United States.
You know, maybe this is even part of the whole lost cause retcon of history, but from my understanding, Robert E. Lee initially was more he shared more in common with the North and was initially planning on working with the North.
The Virginia thing.
Yeah.
It was the Virginia thing.
Until Virginia seceded from the Union, and then he decided that, well, Virginia's my home. I'm not going to let Virginia get
People
overrun.
take for granted that back in those days, people felt a lot more kinship to their state than they did to the federal government.
Yeah.
And that obviously was that most historians agree that was a huge part of his decision to join the Confederacy was Virginia's decision to do that.
Yeah, and from my understanding, I might be getting this wrong because I'm trying to pull on the information that I had from researching the Confederate iconography episode that we did like 3 years ago. But from my understanding, Robert E. Lee was anti-slavery, and he actually released his slaves at one point. And I could be wrong. Like I said, this could be part of the lost cause retcon of history. But I heard that he released his slaves, and like I said, the only reason that he actually took up arms and joined the South was because the South seceded from the Union, and he wasn't going to let Virginia be overrun. He was going to fight for his home state.
I don't know the facts around that. You know where his property is, right?
No.
Oh, his Arlington National Cemetery.
That's
was his
right.
property.
His house. It's the what do they call it? Oh, it's just called the Arlington House.
His
right?
house is still there. It's at the top of the hill. It overlooks all of D.C. His house was the house. He could see the entire District of Columbia from his house. It's literally, you can walk down it. Let's say there was no roads or anything like there are now there. You could walk down the hill from his house. And if that bridge is there, you walk. He could walk into the District of Columbia within 15 minutes.
Wow, that's
you
crazy.
can see all of DC from his house. But the first basically they took his house and started burying Union soldiers there, and then it became a thing, and now it's Arlington National Cemetery.
That's crazy.
Ironically, Robert Todd Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln's oldest son, has the best piece of real estate on the entire property.
Speaking of Robert Todd Lincoln, let me get through these last few things.
I
about,
apologize.
No. This is all good shit. Yeah. This is why we had you on the show, Jack. Is because this is all good shit. I'll get through the last stuff about Ulysses S. Grant, and then we're going to be getting into Abraham Lincoln. And you have a very, very fucking interesting story to tell about Robert.
I think
Todd
it's one
Lincoln.
of the greatest fun for the most part stories in American history. Yeah,
there was already a lot of coincidences in Abraham Lincoln's life overall. I mean, there's a lot of interesting stuff about Abraham Lincoln, but the story that you're going to tell on the show tonight, it's one of the most insane fucking stories in American history.
Yeah.
So, after a successful career leading troops into battle, Grant developed a friendship with Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln held Grant in such high regard that on April 14th, 1865, 5 days after Grant's victory at the Appomattox at the Appomattox Courthouse, the president invited him to attend a play at Ford's Theater. Grant declined Lincoln's invitation due to previous plans he had made to visit his children.
So he's just like, nah, Mr. President, I'm going to do my thing.
Yeah, I
spend some time with my kids. He's
gotta
a good
go
man.
see my kids.
Yeah.
He chose the kids over the president.
Damn. Yeah, good family man. As Grant and his wife made their way to New Jersey by train, they learned the play had ended with a very surprising and unfortunate twist. And that brings us to our next Civil War icon, which is Abraham Lincoln. So I'll get through this introductory information real quick so I can pass this off to Jack to tell this story because it's a good fucking story. Honest Abe was born February 12, 1809 in a simple log cabin in Indiana. The future president was self-educated and worked as a lawyer before becoming a politician. Many are aware of his political career, but what is less well known is that he was the original incarnation of Rowdy Roddy Piper. The 16th president of the United States was actually an accomplished wrestler, losing only once in almost 300 matches.
No shit.
Yeah. He's the only president.
He had gigantism, right? Well,
it's theorized that he had gigantism.
I mean, he was a big guy.
He was very, very skinny, but he was
He
described.
was actually a wrestler, though?
Yeah, he was.
I knew he
actually
would
a
wrestle
wrestler.
people for fun, but I didn't know.
Well, it's not like he was a professional
Like
wrestler.
in school?
But he would participate in in
tournaments and shit?
wrestling matches. I don't know how in depth he got into all of that, but he did enough wrestling that out of 300 matches, he only has one recorded loss.
300 matches that are recorded.
And he's the only president to ever be inducted into the Wrestling Hall of Fame. Lincoln was so good, in fact, that he would even talk shit to his opponents and the crowd. In one instance, after defeating his opponent, Lincoln turned to the audience and boasted, quote, "I'm the big buck of this lick. If any of you want to try it, come on and wet your horns." And nobody had the balls to step up to him.
How tall was he?
6'6" or something like that.
6'6". Damn.
I mean, somewhere between like 6'4", 6'6", something. I mean, maybe even taller. He was a really tall guy. If you don't count the top hat.
That's not including the top hat. Okay.
Not including the top
So
hat.
he's 7 feet tall.
Yeah, with the top hat on. While there are many stories we could discuss regarding Lincoln, there is one in particular we're going to focus on today, and it involves an insane coincidence that occurred at a train station somewhere between 1863 and 1864. And this is where I'm going to pass it off to you, Jax. The rest of this was all this story, but
well, if you already have that in the docket, then you want to tag team it, guys?
yeah,
or triple team it?
Yeah, we can tag team it if you want.
I mean, you just presented a piece of information earlier before we started the show that I was unaware of.
I actually
makes it even fuckier.
I literally did not know that until about an hour before I got to the
bizarre.
studio today.
And by the way, this isn't hearsay. This isn't a myth or a legend. This is well documented.
Yes,
and actually, there's a tie into Grant with it as well. But we were talking about Petersburg earlier, right about the time that the siege of Petersburg began. This was in late 1864, early 1865. They're not really sure, but it was sometime in that winter time. The tide had been turned. Things were looking good for the people were getting the feeling that we were going to come out of this war with a Union victory. Robert Todd Lincoln, the oldest son of President Abraham Lincoln, was who also was a Union officer. He worked for Grant at the time. Actually, he was on his staff.
Really?
Yeah.
What I heard is that he was attending Harvard at the time that this story happened.
It might have. Okay, so then he went and worked for Grant afterwards. Then, but he worked on Grant's staff. At
How many brothers did he have? Did Lincoln have?
I think Lincoln had.
Did Robert Todd or Abraham?
Lincoln?
Lincoln, yeah.
Robert Todd Lincoln had one younger brother who I think had already passed away. I think they lost a child while he was in office. So Robert Todd Lincoln, oldest son of President Abraham Lincoln.
Okay.
He was like probably 19, 20 years old at the time, standing on a train platform in Paterson, New Jersey. All of a sudden, there's this surge that happens. It's still to this day. There's no barrier there, right? So the train's coming in. The audience or the other passengers get antsy. There's a surge that happens with all the other passengers, and he gets launched off the platform right onto the rail track as this train is coming in.
So from what I read from Robert Todd Lincoln's biography is that the train had already arrived at that point, and there's a gap in between the train platform and the train itself.
Yeah.
And he got knocked down into that gap.
Yeah.
And at that point,
the train started moving, and it twisted him, caught him in between the platform and the train itself, and twisted him off his feet. Snap him in half.
Where he's either at risk of being just, crumpled in between the platform and the train itself, or he's going to fall underneath the train and just get turned into hamburger.
And right a split second before those scenarios were about to happen, a hand comes down and, like Superman, launches him back up onto the platform within split second of his life being ended.
Yeah, like a fucking movie scene.
Yeah, right out of the movies. Gets launched back onto the platform.
Grab him by the coat collars.
They didn't have media back then like they did now, so the guy who had just saved this guy's life had no idea whose life he had just saved, that he was the son of the president. But Robert Todd Lincoln immediately recognized who had saved him. He was the most famous actor in America, Edwin Booth. was his name. Edwin Booth came from acting royalty at that time. At that time, the Booths were like the Barrymores, or what would be a good modern day equivalent of like acting, like generational acting families,
Like the Nicolas Cage. And
the Coppolas.
Yeah,
The
Coppolas would
He
be
came
good.
from like a Coppola-esque type acting family in America. All of his brothers, his father was an established acting legend in America.
Who was the better actor, though, this guy or Nicolas Cage?
I would have to go with Mr. Booth. He played Hamlet. Yeah, he played Hamlet. They're never giving Hamlet to Nick Cage. Okay?
Yeah.
They gave Hamlet to Arnold once, though.
That was a little side piece in Last Action Hero. It wasn't actually.
He was
a full
really good in
movie.
that, though.
He was
really
very
good in that scene.
We watched that. we watched that scene just the other day together.
Anyway,
Yeah, so Robert Todd Lincoln's like, holy shit, Edwin Booth just saved my effing life. Anyways,
That's crazy.
They did the whole, thank you, sir. No, thank you. All right, I'm glad to help. And then they went on their separate ways, right?
yeah.
Yep.
Obviously a horrifying experience for anyone to go through.
So something that we talked about before the show.
Do you think he
that-
told
Oh,
his dad?
yes,
Do you think he told his dad, though?
He
I'm
did.
sure he
fell?
told Daddy I almost died, and Edwin Booth saved
Are
me.
you sure, though? Because
he-
that would be embarrassing, right? You fell on the tracks? What the hell?
No, he briefly mentioned it to his father, but he made sure to keep it from his mother because his mother was already
She's going downhill.
Yeah, she was very protective because they had already lost a child.
that one son.
Yeah.
And Edwin Booth, and I'm sure he mentioned to his dad, oh, it was Edwin Booth. Everyone knew the president knew who Edwin Booth was. Everyone did. But yeah, what you had mentioned before the show, I had no idea.
There was somebody traveling with Edwin Booth at the time who
It would make sense that they were traveling together.
it would make a lot of sense that they were traveling together. But yeah, like I said, I didn't know this until about I don't know, an hour or two before I showed up here. He was traveling with a man named John T. Ford, who owned a theater. So I'll let Jack pick it up from here. Just remember the name John T. Ford.
So this was, again, winter of 1864, 1865. By April of 1865, about approximately 4 months after this incident occurred, the Civil War had ended at Appomattox. Lee signed his surrender to Grant.
So the surrender happened on April 9th
And
at Appomattox.
At Appomattox. April 14th, President Abraham Lincoln decides to do a little celebratory play out with the wife.
Abraham
that night.
Lincoln even invited Grant to join him at the play, but as we mentioned earlier, Grant had
couldn't make
plans
it. To hang with his
to
He
go
invited
on
some
to
other
meet his
random
children.
officer, like a major or something. I don't know if he was on his staff but he had invited another military officer and his wife. But so they sit down in their special little presidential booth at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C.
Owned by John T. Ford.
Owned by John T. Ford. And in the middle of the play, another actor entered the premise. Now, back then, nowadays, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what your name is, who you are. If you want to go near the president, the Secret Service is doing a full vetting program.
Right.
No matter who you are, it does not matter. Back then, this other actor walking into the theater, it was, he's one of the actors. He works here. His name was, I'm not going to give you his name.
Oh, okay.
But that actor
guess.
happened to be armed at that time, walked up a staircase, walked past a couple Union soldiers who just were kind of relaxing. No, I'm guarding the president. It's not my job to give a fuck about my job right
fucking
now.
off, apparently.
Yeah, they were not paying attention. And as an actor, he would have had access to anywhere in the theater.
Yeah.
I think had he done any acting at the Ford's Theater?
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, he's like an employee of the place.
He's an employee of the place. And he opened the back door to the presidential box, walked in quietly, put the gun behind Mr. Abraham Lincoln's head, and pulled the trigger.
got him.
Jumped on the stage, yelled "Six Semper Tyrannis," death to tyrants in Latin, and ran off the stage. He broke his leg in the process, or sprained it, or some shit. But the guy who killed the president, I think a lot of people know this name. It was John Wilkes Booth, who was the younger brother of Edwin Booth, who had
so
just
fucking
saved
crazy, dude.
the life of Abraham Lincoln's son, Robert Todd Lincoln, months earlier.
Yeah.
While hanging out with the guy that
While
owned
hanging
the
out
theater.
with the owner of the theater that
Yeah.
Lincoln would eventually die in.
What the fuck?
So anyways, long story short, they killed John Wilkes Booth. They captured all the conspirators. They got hung, yada, yada, yada.
They hung him?
Oh, yeah.
The conspirators. John
the
Wilkes
conspirators,
Booth died
in a barn. They shot him they set the barn on fire and fucking
shot
killed
him. Yeah.
Now, Edwin Booth, honestly, he's a true actor in the sense that he wasn't really a political guy, but he was not. He in no way condoned what his brother did. Like, he was grief stricken.
That was going to be my next question. Like, what happened to his brother? Like,
Grief stricken that his brother did that shit. Like, he was horrified, not only because like the nature of my little brother murdered someone, much less the president of the United States. It's like, oh, what's this going to do to my fucking career? That's a fair question.
yeah.
So it was this terrible thing for Edwin Booth to go through. Obviously, Lincoln died. Robert Todd Lincoln actually showed up and got to see his father as he passed away. He was there in his father's final moments.
How long did Lincoln live after he got shot?
He died the next morning.
Yeah, it was less than 24 hours.
He probably shot anywhere from about 7 p.m. till about 10 p.m. He died in the morning.
Was he functional? Like, was he able to talk to anybody? He was just
comatose.
Yeah, he was gone. Mortally wounded.
Sucks.
So anyways, this is the crazy thing is years later, Edwin Booth had resumed his career and he was playing Hamlet, which is the greatest role an actor could have, especially at that time. And Robert Todd Lincoln was working for Ulysses S. Grant, who was then president of the United States. And Ulysses S. Grant sent a letter to Edwin Booth saying, basically, Robert Todd Lincoln thanks you for what you did for him that day. And they said about Edwin Booth, it said it was like the only thing that ever consoled him about the whole experience, that Robert Todd Lincoln recognized that it was him who saved his life
and didn't hold a grudge against
him.
What a weird
against him.
connection, like a spiritual connection between the families.
It would be the equivalent.
One brother killed the dad and one brother saved the son. Like, what the fuck?
It would be the equivalent of if like if like Owen Wilson saved the life of Hunter Biden, and then a few months later, Luke Wilson decides to go off
assassinates Joe Biden.
Yeah, right. Like, it's such a bizarre story.
That is such a weird. So what would have happened if he didn't save him and he got ran over by a train? Maybe Lincoln wouldn't have got shot.
I mean, yeah.
I mean, possibly.
They're connected
maybe
by wormholes and rubber bands and space time and shit.
But
maybe Lincoln would have been in mourning.
Robert Todd Lincoln, people don't realize this, that he had a very now that poor son of a bitch was with his father as he died from a gunshot wound to the head, watched his younger brother die, and then he had to institutionalize his mother. His mother eventually went crazy.
Fuck.
But Robert Todd Lincoln lived a very successful public life. He was
Was he tough like Lincoln? Was he tall?
He was an average looking dude.
He had his mother's frame.
He didn't have gigantism, which is a genetic disorder. Yeah. No, he went on and he was the ambassador to the UK, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong, he was the Secretary of War, which would be the modern equivalent of the Secretary of Defense. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Or Secretary of State. He held a very high position. And
Grant.
And no joke, if you go to Arlington Cemetery and you look at the Kennedys are there, all these metal war heroes everywhere. If you look at the biggest fucking headstone in the best piece of real estate overlooking the District of Columbia on that entire property, Robert Todd Lincoln has the best fucking headstone and view. His resting place is in Arlington. Yeah. Best spot on the entire property.
Really?
Yeah.
So if you want, you go hang out.
Which is on Robert E. Lee's old property. Yeah.
So you go have a drink with him at a, salute him and have a beautiful view while you have some whiskey.
Robert Todd Lincoln lived a full life. I think he died in the 1910s, 1920s, lived a full, died in his 70s or 80s, lived a great life, but
that's fucking crazy. Yeah. That is an insane story.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Something else that's really ironic about the whole situation is everybody knows now that the Secret Service protects the president, but Abraham Lincoln signed the legislation to create the Secret Service, and it happened like the day before he was assassinated.
Hadn't really gathered their SOPs at that point yet.
Yeah, not quite. And still, this is something that...
Like, don't let actors just walk around the president.
Exactly. Nobody can trust a fucking actor.
Pat him down first.
At the very least. So two things. John Wilkes Booth was armed with a pistol and a dagger. After he shot Abraham Lincoln, one of Lincoln's...
it was that military officer.
Yeah, the military officer jumped up and tried to confront him, and he slashed him and got away.
Fuck. Imagine if Grant was there.
The guy... I mean, Grant probably would have done a little... Well, I mean, at least there would have been
two
military...
It's a play.
He would have been passed out drunk.
Grant would have been fucking hammered. He would have slept through the whole thing. He got shot?
What happened?
the guy who, the military officer who attempted to save Lincoln, went on to go absolutely insane and murder his whole family and ended up institutionalized.
Did not know that. Hey, do you guys mind if I do the worst thing you could possibly do in the middle of a show, the most unprofessional thing?
I actually really need to pee also.
Oh,
why don't we just wrap it up?
Alternate?
We should just wrap it up.
We're
'cause
actually
done.
then. You want to just wrap it up real quick and then we
Let's
go?
do a hard wrap. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
All right,
already. It's
we'll
late.
go ahead and wrap it up. So, yeah, Abraham Lincoln got assassinated. The guy that was protecting him ended up going insane and killing his family. Abraham Lincoln signed the legislation to create the Secret Service. Secret Service wasn't enacted at that point to save him. So anyway, that brings us to the end of this episode. Jack and I really have to take a piss, so we're going to wrap things up right now.
This is the most anticlimactic way to wrap up this awesome show.
I have been thinking the exact same thing for about the last 15 to 20 minutes. So yeah, we're going to wrap this up real quick. Everybody, thank you for joining us. This has been the Iconoblast podcast. I am Matt Cooper. That is Joel Benner. And this is the one and only Jack Mandaville, reminding you to never take anything at face value.
Jack, thank you so much for coming, dude. You're the shit.
Tack så mycket. Thank you very much in Swedish.
All right. We're done.
Oh, thanks. Sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
You gonna get your pants?
Oh, yeah, no, it's bad.
No, do your thing. Honestly, I've been thinking the same thing for a while, too, so don't feel bad.
Oh, shit. Oh,
God.
shit.
Did you cut over there? That would have been a great idea.
I cut just after.
Jeez Louise. Oh,
Believe it.